Well, we started out in single family first, way back in 2005. And I had different mentors along the way and coaches. A lot of that was really based on how I wanted to grow the business, but also some financial challenges. And we can talk a little bit about that today too, because there's kind of been a little headwinds going on this week, especially in the last 3 days. And then in 2015, one of my single family coaches connected me with my multifamily mentor. He started out as my coach. I'm in his mastermind. I have two masterminds, so one cannot be enough. I have some very specialized kinds of needs and tools that I want in my toolkit. My dad was in construction. He was a subcontractor. So I always think about making sure I've got the right tools in my toolkit.
Welcome to DFW Grit. I'm Dr. James Taylor and I'm your host, and this is more than just a podcast. We dive into the stories of the movers, the shakers, the small business owners, the entrepreneurs right here in the DFW Metroplex. This is your home for authentic, real stories that prove what happens when you don't back down. Let's get to work. All right, hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of DFW Grit. As always, I'm your host, Dr. James Taylor. I'm going to bring our guest on real quick, and I was just discussing with her off camera the little change I made in the introduction. Normally, we bring a guest on. I kind of give you their bio. I give you their kind of what brought them here, how we came to know one another. And I told her I immediately stopped researching her as soon as I found this. She's got a wonderful quote, and I don't think there's really another way that would prove she's more appropriate to be on today than this. This is just right at the top of her LinkedIn profile, and it literally stopped me in my tracks. So I'm super excited to introduce Miss Sharon Riddle. And the quote at the top of her profile was, "Most of my success in life has come from consistency, discipline, and grit. Moving forward, my new choice is inspired action." Okay, stop me in my tracks. I didn't want to step on the toes of anything else that she's accomplished. If she can write that so well, I would way rather hear more about her directly in her words as opposed to what I could find on Facebook and Instagram. So without further ado, our next episode of DFW Grit and our guest, Miss Sharon Riddle. So Miss Sharon Riddle, welcome to an episode of DFW Grit. I absolutely love every single one of those words that I read. That was awesome. Like I said, I don't think I could find another guest that is more appropriate for the show than you based on that. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me, James, and thanks so much for being inspired. My creative writing teacher in high school, I guess, would also be so proud in this moment.
I'm glad to know the creative writing teacher that their words didn't fall on deaf ears. So,
Yeah.
Like I said, real quick introduction, real minuscule amount of research. You are in multifamily. You've created what seems like a budding empire on that. How? Why?
Well, we started out in single family first, way back in 2005. And I had different mentors along the way and coaches. A lot of that was really based on how I wanted to grow the business, but also some financial challenges. And we can talk a little bit about that today too, because there's kind of been a little headwinds going on this week, especially in the last 3 days. And then in 2015, one of my single family coaches connected me with my multifamily mentor. He started out as my coach. I'm in his mastermind. I have two masterminds, so one cannot be enough. I have some very specialized kinds of needs and tools that I want in my toolkit. My dad was in construction. He was a subcontractor. So I always think about making sure I've got the right tools in my toolkit. So that's how all of that started. And I'd previously been a financial analyst and a senior business analyst. So numbers and systems always made a whole lot of sense to me. in my life before real estate.
So what made you make the jump then from finance into real estate?
Well, like a lot of people at times, I was caught in a reduction in force. I'd been with an organization like 6.5 years, did all the right things that, they teach you in school. So got my undergraduate degree from the University of North Texas, got my MBA from the University of Dallas over in Irving. Had a wealth of experience to lend to the projects and still got caught in the cut. That made both my spouse, who is my business partner, and he's an aerospace guy, rethink several different things. So we knew we needed multiple streams of income. So needed to have really more of a backup plan and a way to utilize not only my skill set, my cross skills, my MBA, but also the fact that my dad was a construction subcontractor. So my brothers and I were free labor for any of dad's home improvement projects around our family home.
That old story.
That old
I mean,
story.
that's part of the wonders of growing up, if you will, is the fact that you are 100% free labor.
Free labor. And my dad always brought his no nonsense farm boy attitude to how you are contributing to the family home. So,
Okay.
so your hands were also helpful labor.
I mean, there's again no nonsense, a no nonsense work ethic, and I'm sure you could probably attest to this. Will get you very far.
It will. It really will. And there are times I'm sure my dad would really be laughing at some of the things that I've done. Both he and my father-in-law. My dad was an East Texas farm boy. My father-in-law was a West Texas farm boy. And both of them really valued the fact that we were real estate investors. When a lot of the family were doubters or naysayers.
I mean that this is a wonderful segue. So, I mean, you were. I mean, let's call it spade a spade. You and your husband sounds like both were employees, wonderfully educated, completely adaptive employees, but you were employees.
We
And
were.
then, like I said, your family upbringing was like, hey, all you got to do is do the work. All you got to do is do the work. And it sounds like you guys were both doing the work. And shoot, for all intents and purposes, kind of had the rug pulled from under you. And all right, well, let's not make that mistake again. Let's not give anyone that opportunity to do that again. So let's go over into this completely different realm. You must have had naysayers. People were like, "What are you doing? Why don't you just go find another job doing exactly what you were doing?" So, like, do me a favor. Can you talk about that aspect of it? Because I guarantee, like, there must have been people that just kind of scratched their head at your decision of not just putting out more applications somewhere else.
Well, I will say one of those people was definitely a brother-in-law. And he was one of those guys when we first started. I was self managing our single family portfolio. So I was working with a collection and a team of handymen, general contractors, and specific contractors such as plumbers, so the master plumbers and the master electricians. But one time we were at a family gathering around the table, and he abruptly said, I would never deal with tenants and toilets. I never really dealt with the tenants and toilets myself because the handymen were really faster at that. It'd been some years since, I'd been doing, my brothers and I had been doing all the free labor home improvements with dad. And so I knew that time is money. And so I have to have a person who really is doing this kind of work day in, day out, because time is money. You've got to really efficiently turn a home and have it in a make ready state for a tenant.
No, that's it's interesting. So I personally, I own the building that we're in right now that I work out of. And in talking to the previous landlord, funny little story, like he came from somewhere up in the Midwest, let's say Ohio or something like that. And speaking to his wife, they had a bunch of rental houses and they sold all the rental houses and they moved to Texas and they bought commercial. And I just asked them one day, I was like, hey, why did you guys decide to buy commercial as opposed to, single family units? Because that's obviously what you were used to. And just so matter of factly, just looked me straight in the eye and goes, there's fewer toilets to fix. How did you, or why did you decide to move from single family into multifamily?
Well, because of scale, it's scalable. And there also are some additional tax advantages that you don't have on the single family side of things.
Oh,
So that is why. And at that time, and they're talking about allowing that to continue instead of being sunsetted, bonus depreciation. Of course, that affects you
okay.
too with your business and your building. But that those are some things. And I will tell you also, James, that once we went to Columbus, Ohio, and we were interested in investing as limited partners, so passive investors, in two properties in Columbus, Ohio, apartments. The same brother in law never treated what we were doing the same. He saw it as some kind of a business versus a hobby. Magically changed everything.
Just magic by the grace of God, he saw the light, you might say.
He's a smart guy. He's a CPA, so worked for Ohio Health up in uh, up in Ohio, and but and that's very interesting because he's not the only person that has that kind of perception change, because you're dealing with businesses, and somehow they didn't really see, even though I was self-managing multiple single family homes, it was a business. I always have had a CPA that I've worked with. I actually have gone through 3 CPAs. Currently I have a team of CPAs, a couple of CPAs, and a bookkeeper that I'm working with regarding the multifamily. And since the time of the single family investments in 2005 to the turn in 2015, moving forward into 2025, which is another decade, we had invested in 18 multifamily properties.
Dang. Let's say the uninitiated listener or viewer. Now it sounds like you have something that you spoke about being an active manager of versus other investments that you're a passive manager of. What's the difference or the delineation between the two?
Well, with the passive manager, with the limited partner, you're not involved in directly in the operations. However, and this was a cross skill for me that was really easily accessed, they have monthly reports. So I read all the monthly reports while my spouse, who is still in aerospace, he's still at his W-2 job
Oh, okay.
in Dallas Fort Worth at Bell Helicopter. So he's loves things that fly too, as well as multifamily real estate. But we ended up really working through a lot of that, and it just made a lot of sense because I did have those skill sets to lend to that. I will say, within the last 2 years, I have really been a lot more hands on in my communication with the general partner that brought me on to a syndication, which is just a group purchase of an apartment, than I had previously. So, some challenges with some of the debt. Debt became more expensive. Some people felt a little more squeezed because they had opted for some bridge loans, some more variable loans. And they're really having to tighten up some of their asset management skill sets because
Mm-hmm.
the part of the driver is the debt, but also the other part of the driver is some of the tenants, and just really being on top of the occupancy, and if you need to move forward into eviction, into the evictions, and just really keeping that process streamlined and very, very tight.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like when you're the more people you deal with, uh, God love them, the more potential for problems that you open yourself up to. It kind of leads me into another question I hit on a lot with all of our guests is, we got DFW Grit. We're talking about people kind of making their own way, making their own rules in a sense.
Yep.
A lot of times when we go out on that path where we're going to make it happen, there's not always a manual. There's not always a how-to book. Now, I hear you say you've got different coaches and mentors and mastermind groups, which I'm right there with you. I love to surround myself with basically people who are trying to do better in some way, shape, or form. But can you speak to people who are, maybe early in this process where they're deciding to go out on their own and they're worried about the unknown? Could you do me a favor? Just kind of speak to some instances where you feel you've had to either find a way or make a way going forward simply because there wasn't just a roadmap for you.
Well, honestly, I think that that's kind of been a lot of path in my life. I had one of those after school jobs, even when I was in high school, because I wanted to get my car. I was going to have to work my way through college, kind of saw all of that writing on the wall. And of course, my dad said, "Well, you're not going to be able to get a job." He's just one of those people that he would immediately kind of go into the no zone. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to make that happen. Now, my first job was not illustrious. It was at Long John Silver. So, food, fast food. But, I was able to get another job from being there. And I was in a DECA class. And that's where you could get a retail job versus, a fast food job. So I had my after school jobs, worked my way through college, ended up in the workforce, but I always wanted to get an MBA because it was very interesting because way back in the early 80s, I was with Arco Oil and Gas, and there were some females who honestly they were looking for their future husband. But here
Mm-hmm.
I was going to some lunches with some of the guys, and I was going to get an MBA. One of them already had one. He was kind of coaching us up, and a couple of the rest of us we were looking to get our MBAs in the future. Well, I had to move into another sector, but I did take that time and slug out the MBA. Now, by the time I got to the end of that point, not a lot of women making it through. There weren't a lot of women really working on their MBAs in the 90s as it was. But by the time you got to the very end, even fewer. So in my capstone class, there were only two women,
Wow.
only two in 1994. And two of us were part of a trio. The professor called it the triumvirate, hailing back to, you know, the Romans and Julius Caesar, etc.
Yeah.
But he had kind of an interesting sense of humor. But yeah, two of us, we were on that capstone team. So it just showed me that, you can be in leadership positions. But one of the things that I had really discovered in the W2 working world is as a female, that glass ceiling really hit my head awfully hard multiple times through multiple
Mm-hmm.
managers. Either you had a person who was really your sponsor and your champion, or you had a manager who never thought anybody was worth the pay that they were paying. So very interesting and kind of odd combinations along the way. But one of the things that seemed to be kind of a constant theme was the glass ceiling the glass ceiling. Yeah, the whole time I was, in the professional world before real estate investing.
Goodness, yeah, that I imagine hitting your head on it the first couple of times, you're like, "What the hell?" But after a while, it probably gets a little annoying.
Yeah, it really kind of torques you off after a while, James. It really does.
Yeah. So not to change subjects too drastically, but going back to current day and the investing. So also, I don't even know if I said Excalibur Investments. Sorry, I think I was just so enamored with your quote at the beginning, I forgot about the actual business name of the company that you own and work with and have developed. So, how long has that in its current state been up and running?
That has been a couple of years. Dan and I have actually launched multiple LLCs.
Okay.
So we had the single family business way back in 2005. We ended up creating two additional LLCs when we really moved over into multifamily real estate investing. And those were some of the passive investments. And now for our future general partner role, we had created Excalibur Investments of Texas in anticipation of that. And we've done a lot more to build out a back office operations and things of that nature. And me being on podcasts as well, really talking to people about what the environment is, what that looks like, and just a few things about the advantages on the cash side as well as the tax side. But in multifamily investment, the huge gain, if you are in a syndication, is really on the back end. It's the exit. It's part of the exit strategy when the property sells. That is when you have the larger uh, infusion of cash flow as a result of the sale of an apartment complex.
Okay. So with Excalibur and then your other companies, is it just you and your husband? Do you guys are you entertaining new investors? How would somebody get more information about this if this kind of clicked off a little light bulb in their head? Because like personally, I was unaware of multifamily until shoot, I would say probably around COVID. Like I didn't know multifamily was a thing, and I don't know. I got onto some email list or something, and I started getting invited. Hey, come and learn about this, that, and the other. How does your guys' company work as far as that goes?
Well, what we have now is we really have more of a build out of a team. Like I have part of a marketing team. We're finishing out our ebook. I've got a multi-author book that I have contributed a chapter to. One of my podcasters, one of my early podcasters, invited me to. We'll just really write a chapter in this book, and we're going to have a launch party in Addison, Texas, June the 4th. So we're doing that. And then we're just adding some additional people. I've got a network IT person I'm adding. I've already got a software and hardware uh, computer person that I work with. So part of it has been some teams that I've built business relationships with in more of a contracting or a consulting capacity. But we probably are going to add a virtual assistant or two to work with us as we continue to really in more of the social media realm, because I do have my two CPAs and my bookkeeper that actually Dan works with remotely, and I come in really more for quarterly meetings in that. So we've kind of swapped some roles in that department.
Man, that sounds rather impressive coming from someone who started with just one single family home.
Well, part of it, James, is the fact I had worked as a financial analyst and a senior business analyst. So I was around a lot of web developers and IT people. I was in a system design and analysis class with my MBA because they said, "Oh, wow, you've worked with spreadsheets too long. We got to give you another computer class to go to." So I did that. And I actually laid out the entire design of my website. Now, using my senior business analyst hat, I did use best practices. So I benchmarked one of my investor friends. He already knew that because I told him, because I liked his website a lot. So we used a lot of elements of his website in the functionality of the website for Excalibur Investments of Texas. And that website is www.excalibur, EXCALIBRE, Texas.com. So
Again, thank you for the wonderful setup for the segue. I was going to ask, how can people find you? So we got the website.
we did.
Do me a favor real quick. What's your podcast? And what's the book that you're helping write so people can keep on the lookout for that too?
Okay. Well, I look to be a podcaster closer to probably the end of 2025 or maybe in the summer, because one of the podcasters that invited me to author the multi-author book, my chapter, he has a podcast academy. So I'm going to be working with him so I can really get all of the mechanics lined out very, very well. Because as you well know, not all podcast guests are created equal, and not all podcasters are created equal either. So what I have determined is with some podcasters that are kind of a little new to podcasting, there can be some technical difficulties. And I, coming from my analyst hat, I just really want to kind of minimize that risk and minimize the rework. So that's why I'm going to be working with Ken Walls and his academy, Grow Academy, for to be a future podcaster. That's kind of what I'm going to do with that. And then the book is The Networking Effect. And so it's going to be a collection of business leaders. There's actually going to be an actor who's contributing a chapter. And it's just really talking about how you can utilize networking. And each one of us have our own unique stories and our own unique takeaways that we're going to be delivering in the book.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, there is a bit of a learning curve with podcasting and just the technical integration of it. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you could start it with just a cell phone, but you can make the thing as complicated and as cumbersome as you would absolutely like to. But Sharon, man, I really appreciate your time today. Hell, I really appreciate you reaching out, setting this whole thing up here. And also, like I said before, on your flexibility, we did have to kind of slide you over a couple of weeks. But man, this was fantastic. I appreciate the information. This was a great time. And again, you guys, you will, and I'm not kidding, learn more here by accident than elsewhere by design. And I want to touch on something that Sharon, you hit a couple of times too. You will learn more by collaboration than elsewhere by design. Sharon, it seems like you've got some real good people in your corner that you've kept there for quite some time. So again, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, James. I really value your time. And, we all need a team. We do all need a team, and we all need champions and cheerleaders in our lives and our businesses.
Absolutely. I couldn't argue with that in any way, shape, or form. All right, Sharon, thank you very much. Everybody out there, as always, like, share, follow. Thanks for your time today. We'll catch you on the next episode of DFW Grit.